The Washington Capitals, an organization that has been tested, endured heartache and suffering, only to have that long, brutally arduous journey rewarded with the Stanley Cup in 2018. In the years since then, it has been more of the same that it was before. First-round exits and his star player ascending to hockey deityhood, despite the fact that management and ownership have done everything in their power to fumble away his best seasons. But last year looked to be a return to form of sorts. The question is, does their captain at age 39 still have it in him for one more ride to the Cup? And most importantly, does he have the support to get him there?
I admit it. Last year was rough.
Everybody and their mothers was predicting that before the 2023-24 season, the Capitals would take a massive step back, miss the playoffs yet again, and enter into a long-needed rebuild. With a rookie head coach, shaky goaltending, and their core all injured and or entering the twilight of their years, it seemed logical that the Capitals wouldn't be much of a contender. And yet, even with that minus 37 goal differential, they still managed to scratch and claw their way into the playoffs, despite having absolutely no business making it there. And how did they do it? Well, it was a combination of Charlie Lindgren playing out of his mind in a career year, Alex Ovechkin going on a heater on the back half of the year after a horribly slow start, and new rookie head coach Spencer Carbury pushing all the right buttons that his predecessor Peter Laviolette failed to. Fact of the matter is, the Caps really just got out to a hot start in October, getting to 6 games over 500 by Thanksgiving. The rest of the way, they had a couple of big losing streaks and a couple of small winning streaks, but for the most part, they were just kind of hanging around that 6-7 games over 500 mark until they came down the final stretch of the season. After a 6-game losing streak that seemed to all but eliminate them from playoff contention, they won 4 of their last 5, with those 4 wins coming against teams that were either in the playoffs or ones who they were battling against for that final playoff spot. Yes, in the first round, it was a disappointment getting swept by the Rangers. Other than game 1, the Caps were within 1 goal for most of the games, and if Charlie Lindgren hadn't had an uncharacteristically terrible series, and they weren't going up against Igor Shesterkin, who just went God mode for the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, I think the Caps would have had an opportunity to upset the Rangers, or at least make the series more competitive. Red Wings fans and Penguins fans can meme the Caps to hell, but let's be honest here. Going up against the version of Igor Shesterkin that we faced, you were not winning more than 1 game in the playoffs if you made it in. Spencer Carbury was a ballyhooed hire when he came in before the year last year, and he performed up to expectations. Unlike his predecessor, Carbury leaned on a lot of the young guys, giving them big minutes, and they rewarded him. Guys like Connor McMichael and Hendrix Lapierre were all big contributors last year. It's also impressive that on a team that is so devoid of talent like the Capitals were perceived to be last year, that he managed to take them into the playoffs while others had years with similarly untalented rosters and are still stuck in the basement of their divisions. I said it before when talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois, but Carbs is a really good coach in my opinion because he manages to balance the tactical side of coaching with the interpersonal side. He's not one of those old school skate you into the dirt, call you out in front of the rest of the team. He knows how to put his arm around a guy and work with them on an interpersonal level. And I think that's great because the Caps need a guy who's not only going to help them be competitive now, but can also nurture those young players and bring them up for the next generation once Ovechkin is gone.
You're a star, you're on top, somebody bring you some help. You should kill yourself.
Dread it, run from it, Alex Ovechkin leading the Caps in goal scoring comes all the same. Despite the fact that Ovi started last year on an uncharacteristically career terrible shooting streak, due entirely to bad puck luck and whatever else might have been going on in his life, shooting at an obscenely low rate that he never shot at before, Ovi still managed to score 30 goals at age 38. And down the stretch in the back half of the season, when the Caps were in that dogfight to make the playoffs, 24 goals and 45 points, a 43-goal pace over 82 games. Make no mistake, he may not have the legs of a young man, but this man can still shoot the puck at an elite level. The fact that he's getting disrespected this badly after one admittedly terrible half of the season, and due to the fact that he had absolutely nobody to play with offensively other than Dylan Strome, is just bizarre. Like, people are saying he's not a top 50 player in the NHL. With all due respect, and I do mean with all due respect, get the fuck out of here. This guy is still going to score 30 to 40 goals this year, and if he had anybody who is remotely capable of offensively producing alongside of him, he'll have another 80-point season, no question. He is about to be, either this season or next, the best goal scorer to ever walk the face of the earth, better than Wayne Gretzky. Is there anybody playing hockey right now you can definitively say is better than Wayne Gretzky at anything? Because in about a season, we're going to be saying that about Ovechkin. Cherish watching this guy because there will never be another like him. Top 5 player of all time, and if you don't think so, you don't know puck.
Oh, this guy again.
Ovechkin, of course, will be the headliner on that first line, and he'll be centered by now Dylan Strome. Everybody seems to forget that Strome was basically a lost puppy that the Caps swept up off the street, cleaned up, and he immediately became a 60-point guy playing with Ovechkin. Just Exhibit G, and dude's getting an entire career built off of getting to play with Alex Ovechkin 1 year. Right now, to round out that first line, it looks like it'll be newly acquired Andrew Mangiapane, and on the second line, it'll be their other big-name acquisition of the offseason. Oh god, it's fucking Pierre-Luc Dubois. We'll talk about him more in a bit. He'll be centering Tom Wilson and Connor McMichael on the second line, and no, I did not misspeak. That is the type of offensive talent that Ovechkin basically had to backpack into the playoffs last year. I mean, he would have murdered somebody to have a one-legged Evgeny Malkin as the second line center. On the third line, it's always sunny in DC, with Sonny Milano down there to do some Wayne Robertson type dangles and score exactly 10 goals, centered by Hendrix Lapierre, who Caps fans are all praying will become the next iteration of Evgeny Kuznetsov without the drug habits, and finally Alexei Protas, whose entire game is be big and stand in front of the net and hope a puck doesn't hit you. The fourth line is largely remade. Incredible human Nick Dowd returns to center Taylor Radish and Brandon Duhaime, who the Caps both somehow managed to overpay, because why spend your money trying to get actual good players to help your top six, where you can spend it on bad fourth line players? We sure Brian McClellan wasn't sundowning when he signed those contracts. On defense, though, the Caps did try to make big upgrades to their unit from last year. Nick Jensen is thankfully gone, replaced by Jacob Chychrun in that big trade, and he will anchor that first pairing along with John Carlson, aka the only other player besides Ovechkin and Strome who manages to do something of note offensively. Carly is maybe one of the most underrated defensemen in the entire NHL, and like Ovechkin, it's entirely because since the Stanley Cup run, he has been saddled with broken down refuse as a defensive partner. The Caps also made a big splash by signing Matt Roy in the offseason to go along with their promising young defenseman Rasmus Sandin, who is, in my opinion, just a Steve Eminger clone. It's a Marty party on the third pairing, with Marty Ferravari once again getting saddled with Trevor Van Riemsdyk. I still do not understand how the Caps took so many defensemen so high in the draft, and none of them have managed to beat out Trevor fucking Van Riemsdyk. In goal, they finally cast out Darcy Kemper after signing him to an hilariously bad contract, which required them to take on an hilariously worse contract. But Chucky is still here. Charlie Lindgren will hopefully be playing more like he did in the regular season than the postseason, and they added Logan Thompson for basically nothing to be his backup, which is a great move in my opinion. I think Logan Thompson is a very solid and capable starting goaltender, so if Lindgren does still play like he did against the Rangers, I'd have no problem going to Thompson for most of the year.
Britta's in this?
It was a lot of big moves on the back end for the Caps. Jacob Chychrun is a huge get, especially because they jettisoned Nick Jensen, who was basically just a pylon by the end of his time in Washington. Signing Matt Roy was another big get, even though I think that contract is a little bit bloated for a guy who's a pure shutdown defenseman. And also because, let's be honest, their defense was pretty stout last year. I would have really preferred that they spend some more resources upgrading their top six. They did that, but just in a bad way. Getting Andrew Mangiapane in a trade for a second rounder, which they had excess of, fine. It's all good. They need somebody who can fill the TJ Oshie role for now until Ryan Leonard gets here. But trading for Pierre-Luc Dubois, do I really have to go through again how this is a terrible decision for the Caps? You've locked yourself into one of the worst contracts in the NHL on the hope that Spencer Carbury is going to unmindfuck him. I love Carbs, and I think he worked a lot of magic last year, but the motherfucker is not Doctor Strange.
That's not bad.
I already showered praise on my Goat V and Carlson, but you know who doesn't get a lot of love is Connor McMichael. Dude has grown and evolved into a very solid middle six player who can play on the wing and center, putting up 18 goals and 33 points in his age 23 year. Do I think he's ever going to become an elite playmaker or like a Chris Kreider type two-way player? No, but I think he could definitely be a very serviceable 40-50 point a year guy who can play power play and penalty kill minutes depending on what you need from him.
The Gambletron 2000 says the winner is Cincinnati by 200 points. Why, you worthless hunk of junk?
Last year, I called it. I said that the Caps were going to make the playoffs. They would be the last team in, and sure enough, they were. So get ready, Caps fans, when I tell you we are not making the playoffs this year. I think we've taken a major step back. Pierre-Luc Dubois is a terrible ad. We don't have Backstrom, we don't have Kuznetsov. Even at their advanced age and declining physical states, I would have trusted both of them over Pierre-Luc Dubois. I said the Caps needed to make a big move to upgrade their top six, but I was thinking like trade some firsts for Mitch Marner big, not add a guy who could maybe be a 70-point player if he doesn't melt down on the ice and have a temper tantrum. Best case scenario is the Caps are relatively competitive and slip into the playoffs once again, but I think it's more likely that they're not making the playoffs and we're going to be selling off guys like Mangiapane and Chychrun at the deadline to continue continue the reload and rebuild.
I fell asleep 14 times watching Capitals games last season. I'm pretty sure Ovie single-handedly scored more goals in 08E than the entire Capitals roster did last year.
Welcome to Planet Goal Differential, the only team to find a different way to win hockey games by scoring less goals. Imagining possessing an animal such as the Russian machine and not giving him the proper support. Missing Backstrom every minute. Depth up front is sneaky good though. Nick Dowd is my Selke pick.
As a Caps fan, we have never given Ovie a true 1RW. Sure, Wilson is great, but I've always felt he is more of a true 2RW. Also, GMBM infuriates me sometimes, like trading Vrana and a bunch of assets for Anthony Mantha, and how he wouldn't give Trotz what he was worth, just to name two.
The Capitals are like Groundhog Day. Expect without the humor. Nothing but disappointment after disappointment.